Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Mouthy Money podcast. Before we get started today, I'm joined as ever, by Chris Tute, who is head of consumer finance at communications agency MRM. Hello, Chris.
Hi Ed, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, flying. Yeah, good Monday, sunny outside.
I know.
All good, I think.
Could be worse, basically. I was going to say, before we launch into today's topics, this kind of edition of the podcast we've been doing, obviously, since we launched 7 or 8 months ago now. We started off doing a lot of kind of guest podcasts, and we're still doing those. But I've been calling these the bonus, but I do think that they have rather become the podcast, haven't they, Chris?
Yeah, the norm as opposed to a bonus. You don't want to get people's expectations up. This is the normal.
This is
the normal conversation.
The new normal, as everybody likes to say constantly since 2020, new normal, this and that. So anyway, let's get going with the topics for today. We've got a few interesting ones today, actually. The first one is something that's coming up this week that kind of bears talking about. I know we've discussed it a lot recently in more general terms, but we've actually got a news calendar hook to put that hat on, and that is interest rates and the big anticipation over what's going to happen on Thursday. That's the 1st of August. What the Bank of England are going to do about interest rates. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it is an interesting one because, look, we had our mortgage takeover. The guys set us straight on a few things there about how the base rate decision from a mortgage standpoint is a bit of a media moment, is how it was described. I think Polly Gilbert-Tembo called it that, and I think that's a really good way of phrasing it, in that a lot of attention is put onto it, but actually the prices of mortgages are determined by a myriad of other factors, as we know: swap rates, other external things, currency fluctuations, cost of funding lines, all those kind of things. So, these institutions don't always have squillions and squillions of pounds just sat around doing nothing, ready to lend out. They have to get it from money markets, and there are all sorts of other things that tend to drive those kind of decisions. But even though that has been said, it is a big psychological thing for us, and it does still have an impact on rates to some degree. We've seen last week, I think nationwide went sub 4% for the first time. And again, that came out in the mortgage takeover, where we're talking about certain larger lenders looking to maintain market share by needing to lend out money due to sometimes to do with how much cash they can have on their balance sheets, but also just wanting to make sure that they're able to lend and keep customers engaged with them, because mortgages have, they're a long-term product over a long time that people need to, that they want to keep people engaged with, really, rather than going off to other lenders. So I think it's significant from that standpoint, and one that we should definitely keep an eye on. I don't think there's going to be a flurry of mortgage cuts anytime soon, even if the base rate comes down, although, happy to be wrong on that. But I think the other thing to mention, it's not just mortgages, it's savings. And actually, have we reached an apex? Because savings rates are often tied closely to the Bank of England base rate. And if there's a decision on Thursday to cut it, does that start to mean that it starts to come down a little bit on the cash side of things? And do we need to be looking for the best possible prices for our cash savings? So yeah, it is important. It's one we need to keep an eye on for a whole variety of reasons, right, Ed?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there's kind of, you've got like the small picture stuff here, which is, how do people deal with that on the basis of their own personal finances? They've got debt, they might want to be able to shift it onto some cheaper debt, and looking for that mortgage renewal and that kind of thing. And I think that point around big lenders offering like below market rates because they need to pick up more mortgages for their book, I think it's interesting. If you were looking for a deal and that kind of thing. I think the big thing that we had out of the mortgage roundtable really was that the progress of rates, unless there is really extreme hikes like we saw in 2022 and last year, the progress of it is more of a guide rather than like a hard, this is all going to change now. And I think some of the framing in the media around that about like, isn't it amazing? Rates are coming down and all this kind of stuff is a bit kind of like, there's more to it than that, right? On a big picture level, and I mean, I'm going to out myself as a bit of an interest rates hawk here. I think the past, since 2010, when we slashed rates after the financial crisis and had kind of, effectively 0% or, just above that for such a long time, was actually quite bad for the economy generally. And my kind of unpopular opinion here, if we're talking about unpopular opinions, is I actually think rates should probably just stay around where they are now if the economy can tolerate it, which it is tolerating it at the moment. Obviously.
I can hear the listeners cursing your opinion already, does it?
Look, this is, were it to stay higher for longer, my personal interest in here would be that my mortgage would go up a large amount when I come to remortgage. But they're all of these, hikes in mortgages and stuff are all predicated on the fact that most people can tolerate them with their finances unless their lifestyles change substantially, which is why the Bank of England watches things like employment, because lots of people start losing their jobs, then obviously there is going to be less tolerance for those rate rises because people are not going to have jobs that pay their mortgages, right? The issue we have is that we have had a low rate environment for a really long time, and the big argument that comes is, oh, well, you say these rates are really high, but, back in 1980, whatever, rates were 15% and all that kind of stuff. And we get into this kind of boomer millennial shooting match over who had it worst. But the reality is while interest rates were much higher back then, relative to average wages, people were much better off. And we've had more than a decade of really terrible, wage increases. You look at GDP per capita, which measures, how wealthy we are on a head-by-head basis. We're much worse off than we were before. So my point is this: if wages are now rising strongly, which they are relative to inflation, interest rates are high but being tolerated. Why are we racing to slash rates? And I know mortgage holders are not going to find that easy, but if we're talking about new normal, we have to get to that new normal and try and stay there and maintain an equilibrium.
I think the interesting point there's all interesting points, and very selfless, Ed. Happy to pay more on your own mortgage for the greater economic good. Wow, look at that. He's truly committed to the economic health of the country. I think the key thing you said in there, though, was around the ability to pay. And I think one thing that gets forgotten is the stress testing that the banks were forced to do about whether when you take on a loan, they kind of look at the multiples and see whether or not you're able to pay for sky high interest rates. Now we're probably a bit closer to what those stress tests were, which I think were around 7 or 8% from memory. And I don't know if it was uniform across all of the various lenders, but there is a little bit of headroom there. Now, we wouldn't want to go any further. I think you probably agree with that. But actually, the calculations there to say that people can cope with this stuff. I think the worry is that was probably done outside of a cost of living context. But so far, we haven't seen, mass distress signals going up. But that said, we've got more and more people coming to the end of their deals. So it is on a knife edge. And even the decision itself is on a knife edge, because there's talk about Andrew Bailey having the casting vote this time and it being 50-50. And so it really does feel like it does divide very serious opinion. I suppose that's one way of putting it. While it is a media moment, it is going to be a signal as to how where we're at in terms of the economy, personal finances, confidence in where we're coming into, and then it will have political ramifications as well as personal. So yeah, it's I will be tuning in. I will be interested to see what happens. I mean, I tune in every month. To be honest, listeners, I'm a loser when it comes to that. I do like my economic news.
So last time we had a rate decision, you and I were actually doing this podcast already, and we committed ourselves to some predictions here. So I'm going to commit you again, Chris. I'm going to ask you for a prediction.
Are you? I'm going to hold me to it. All right.
And I'll give one.
All right. Well, you're a hawk, so does that make me a dove? That makes me a dove, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I think they'll cut. I think they'll cut. I think they'll fill that
little one, a little cut,
a very minuscule little trim, 0.25%. Will come off, and that will take us down to 5, won't it? And then we'll stay there for a while until we get towards the end of the year. So, but again, I'm not an economist. I'm just an interested watcher who listens to everyone else's opinion on this. But I do think that, they'll throw a little bone the way of the man and woman on the street. What do you think, Ed?
I think they'll hold. I think they'll hold. I think it'll be close. I think they'll hold. What is it? 9? Is it 9 of them on the MPC? The Monetary Policy Committee. Yeah. I reckon I'd go 9-4 hold. Okay. I'm committing myself to really specific prediction here.
So what does the loser have to do? Do I have to? Is there going to be a forfeit to this?
well, people tend to say they'll eat hats, don't they? And I'm even
Yeah.
wearing a hat. So, no, I don't
Post
know.
some comments, listeners, if you want one of us to pay a forfeit for getting it wrong. Let's up the stakes here, Ed. Come on.
Okay. Oh, God. Well, I haven't done a forfeit in a very long time. I think
This could be the new ice bucket challenge or something.
because I'm never wrong, Chris. That's why.
I can well believe it. I
Yeah,
can well
that's it.
believe this. There we go. There we go.
Brilliant. So we'll wait and see what happens with that then, I guess. It's sure to be interesting, whatever way it swings. Let's keep moving on. I think the next topic we had this week was a bit of a different one, actually, a little bit more lighthearted. And this is from an article from the excellent Laura Whateley in The Guardian. Chris, do you want to give us a very short summary of what the article is? Then we'll dive into the different bits and pieces of it.
So basically, there's a fresh wave of buzzwords that are shifting how people consider or respond to their money. And look, we're all about normal people and what they're doing with their cash. So this really caught our eye. But there are 5 main things that we're going to talk about a little bit, which is cash stuffing was one of them, doom spending, money dysphoria, soft saving, and loud budgeting. So you listeners, you're all engaged with your money. You may have come across some of these things before, but yeah, I thought it was a really good piece, and I've recognised some of myself in some of this and not in others. But taking each one in turn, cash stuffing is this idea of moving away from, I suppose, digital spending. So it's easier to budget when you've got the cold hard cash in your hands, is the idea. And you take money out at the start of the week, month, whatever it may be, put it into an envelope and assign it to what you want to do. And when you run out, you run out. And it helps people to, it's, I suppose, create those kind of friction points to make it just a little bit too hard to just tap the card and go. And actually, it seems, at least to the people that were speaking in Laura Whateley's article, that it does kind of work. Using this kind of strict envelope budgeting system allows them to kind of make sure that they don't end up going over their budgets, and they're actually able to save a few quid as well. So, yeah, I've not done that. But there are kind of, I suppose, digital prompts that allow you to do that as well, or at least I think there are.
Yeah.
And I do have my own very, very rudimentary Excel spreadsheet with spending on it, and an idea of what everything costs from my monthly spend and what I want to save. And so, I suppose I do stuff digital envelopes without getting too sort of what's the word, dismissive of the practical element of it. So yeah. I can see how it works.
So I do. I mean, I will say I do a kind of digital version of it where I have I've got a few different bank accounts. One of them's Monzo, and you can get others like Starling and stuff do as well. Where you have kind of they tend to call them pots or And what I'll do is I'll have my kind of monthly, call it disposable spending, discretionary spending, whatever, stuff I spend on, going to eat out or spend it on Amazon or whatever it might be, stuff that's not kind of bills or essential stuff. And I'll put different amounts in pots, and that's kind of that's your money for that week. That's your money for that week. And that kind of ring fences that, because it's if I run out, because instead of spending all my money, then I'm I can't spend 2 weeks now with no money. It'll be kind of okay, you've run out of, your spending money for this week or whatever. So I do a version of that. I think the cash version of that is more extreme. Possibly, would be, especially considering how easy it is to spend money online. I bet putting everything in cash forces you to be more more thrifty in that sense. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bad idea. I think where we draw the line is people who start doing this cash stuffing thing and then putting that money under the mattress and leaving it for a year. Because then you're not, you're just devaluing your cash. Don't do it. It's not a good idea. We're not offering financial advice here, but money that's earning 0% under a sofa or whatever is just it's not good. So I'd say it's good for short-term, budgeting, not long-term saving of any kind.
Right.
So what have we got up for the next one?
Doom spending.
Doom spending. That was, yeah. So I like it. And this is with a kind of part of what I wanted to talk about with this article, because I find it interesting because a lot of it's framed as kind of this is stuff that's emerging as trends on TikTok and social media. And it's kind of very like, yeah, Gen Z have got this kind of cool thing. It's called doom spending. It's like, I look at doom spending. What is do? Well, it's just what we used to call like retail therapy, right? It's like, oh, I've had a bad day. I'm going to go shopping and buy myself something nice. And that's what doom spending is, like a more extreme version of that, where it's like,
well, it's interesting, the language, Ed, actually.
Yeah.
Like, doom spending suggests you know where this leads. Whereas retail therapy suggests there might be a positive outcome.
It's like a more, but it's just like a more like, it's like a darker version of retail therapy. It's like it's like the kind of evil twin of retail therapy, where it's kind of like retail therapy is like, I've had a bad day at work, so I'm going to go and buy myself, you know, something from the shop. Whereas doom spending is, oh, we've got a pandemic, so I'm going to spend all my money on Amazon on stuff I don't need. That's what doom spending apparently is. So, yeah, I think it's just like a slightly like more like darker, sadder version of retail therapy, I guess. Whereas it's funny actually, because it's that kind of framing, isn't it? Where retail therapies are very kind of like noughties. Yay, capitalist economy, everything's great, go spend a bit of money, it'll make you feel better, sort of stuff. Doom spending's very kind of like late stage capitalism. Oh, I'm just going to empty my bank account because I'm sad, sort of stuff.
I can't buy a house, there's no future, why bother? I might as well own that thing, whatever that thing is. Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily encourage it. I have always been, and we've had this kind of what is it, Epicureans versus Stoics discussions before.
You've got a new desk, haven't you, Ed, on that?
I know. So this brings us back to the Epicureans and the Stoics. I'm the Epicurean because I do like to spend money things that make me happy. Like a new desk. But I bought, I'm defending my desk decision because basically I went to work from home during the pandemic, and I've been kind of like hovering on things that are not really desks for quite a long period of time, and just using bits of furniture that were available to me. The last desk I had was a £30 job from like a local like refurnish shop. I don't know if you get around where you are down here. We have there's like a chain of like, it's like charity shops basically, with like, they basically buy and upcycle old bits of furniture, and you can go and you can get like a desk for £30 sort of thing. And that's what I was living off. And it was like basically a piece of junk that I've been perching on. So I've now gone and spent. I will say I bought an antique desk for £150, Chris.
Oh, well, there we go. So it's an investment. It does sound suspiciously like you're justifying your doom spending, Ed, but I won't get too judgmental. If it's the right choice for you, it's the right choice for you. And it's obviously it's got great utility to it, so it's not a waste.
100%. It's
right now.
Call it an investment, just not a financial one.
There you go. Investment in posture.
What was the next one? Go on.
You mentioned late stage capitalism. This is one where I start to put my slightly Poindexter hat on. And actually, it's a bit more serious, and it's money dysphoria. And Laura spoke to a case study, a gentleman called Haj, I think, from Windsor, who basically was earning nearly 100 grand in the corporate world, but because of what he was seeing fed back to him on social media through influencers like Stephen Bartlett, Drake, apparently it says in the article, and Adu Ross, that he felt that he just wasn't earning enough money, basically, to live the lifestyle that he should be living. And yeah, I've been, to take this off in a more philosophical bent, Ed, bear with me, I have been reading a philosopher called Byung-Chul Han recently. He wrote a book called The Burnout Society. And this is quite interesting because I think this really kind of feeds into this. And his argument, in a nutshell, is that we used to live in a disciplined society where you'd have a boss, and a boss would say to you, you need to work harder, worker, and create consequences for you around that. And everyone kind of stayed stuck in their kind of social roles, but everybody knew the score, and that's kind of how things were supposed to work. We moved from that into a society that has an excess of positivity, which sounds like a weird statement, but I think what he's trying to get out there is that we've all become our own bosses. We've all become entrepreneurs of the self in this, in the current world. And therefore we put pressure on ourselves to achieve things. So the reason you're not a millionaire, Ed, is you're not thinking, well, maybe you're a billionaire. Don't know how well this is going.
Not that well.
Not that well. No, okay, fair enough. But the reason you're not a billionaire is that you're not doing something right, Ed. That's kind of where, and that people internalize that and start to have their own inner critic, and that tells them they need to do more, they need to work harder, and inevitably leads to unrealistic expectations, which leads to kind of burnout. So this money dysphoria thing really does strike me as an interesting idea. And Laura mentioned that it's according to research by Credit Karma, and that it's a social media fueled distortion of how much everyone else has. And actually, through work, this gentleman was able to see the truth. He worked with a charity called GamCare because he got into gambling to try and build up this his fortune. And started to see that actually behind a lot of the social media posts are smoke and mirrors. Like it wasn't normal people. They were for obvious, which seemed kind of obvious, but when you're caught up in the moment and you're seeing what they're doing, it may not seem that obvious. So, and the reality, it says here, is people just get into bigger debts, more mental health problems, relationship breakdowns because they over leverage themselves trying to achieve something that's completely unobtainable. So I think it's quite a serious subject. I think it has real impacts. And I think one thing we'd like to encourage on this, I know you guys do at Mouthy Money, is look, basically, you know, you do your best. You're doing your best. That's fine. I don't like the idea of kind of whacking yourself over the head saying you need to have every aspect of your money nailed at all times. It's a moving picture. Things change. So just try and do more good than bad and you'll end up in a better place, I think. And again, that's not financial advice. I think that's just kind of a good kind of common sense for you and giving yourself a bit of a break.
So I think, I mean, it's an interesting take on it. I do think there's an element here of it's actually what, you know, you would have once called the kind of keeping up with the Joneses sort of thing. But what I feel like it is a more extreme version of that. But basically social media has taken keeping up with the Joneses and turned it into something very bad for everybody's mental health.
Basically. Well, yeah, keeping up with next door is fine, but keeping up with Drake's a bit difficult. This is what social media has, you know, a habit of doing sometimes, right? Yeah. It's turbocharging something to, you know, its most toxic conclusion, where people look at, you know, others on social media and have these unbelievably unrealistic expectations of the life that they should be living, and this kind of thing. Of people, you know, you see influencers online who live these kind of, you know, idealized existences. There's been a lot of in the press in the past few days about the trad wife stuff, and there's this like family in somewhere in rural America who live this kind of like crazy, like back to basics, ruralistic lifestyle, and that it's like a big trend now, you know, with like homemaking type stuff basically, and it takes social media takes something that is a thing and turns it into a perverse extrapolation of that thing. Just, you know, everything divorced from any kind of reality. And I don't know, I'll get into it. Yeah, I think it does. It becomes a bit grotesque. It becomes a bit unhinged and becomes unrealistic and unobtainable. And that just seems to drive negative emotions in people at times. There's loads of great things social media does in other ways and connecting people with things like that. And we're trying to do that with our social posts in terms of getting good messages out. But there's no doubt about it that it does eventually can lead people into tighter spots with and into areas that are difficult for them to navigate. So I think, it's good to remember that, or give a term, you know, I know you say keeping up with the Joneses. I think it's a little bit more, it's deeper than that. It is more internalized on that. I think it's not just, you know, a bit of a competition with, you know, the Joneses next door. It's more, there is no Joneses next door anymore. The competition's with yourself, and that can be quite damaging, I think. Which is why, you know, I think it's quite an interesting one for the 21st century. So the next we've got is soft saving.
Yeah. So soft saving is, and I think it's like it's a bit of a rebrand. Well, not quite. It's slightly different, but it spares some, well, not quite similarity to FIRE, but it's all focused on like eking out your savings basically. And I think it again talks about this kind of a lot of people have very stretched budgets. You know, your kind of young people have no expectation of being able to save a deposit for a house or whatever. Or it's kind of like, you know, if you have when we talk about it all the time, you have a lifetime ISA and you bung 400 quid a month in it or 300 quid a month in it or something, you know, you'd be able to afford a deposit in 2 years, but actually saving £300 a month is totally unrealistic. So you have this concept of soft saving where it's like, I'm literally doing like micro saving here, where it's if my, you know, spending for the week is, if I have £52.20, I budget myself £50 and I save that £2.20 in a savings account. And that's kind of like the long and short of it. I think there's a lot of trends here with digital tools from kind of apps and stuff that do like rounding up and that kind of thing. And that's something that I've had the rounding up thing turned on my, one of my accounts, and I do find it quite good because you look at it and be like, oh, there's 15 quid in there I didn't realize I had. But instead of then banking that 15 quid, I tend to just roll it back into what I'm spending, be like, yes, extra £15 for me to use because I've spent all my other money, kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's laudable actually doing something like that, saving, eking out, everything here and there and putting, little and often, I think is a really good attitude to have. So yeah, I think that's quite a nice one actually, soft saving.
Yeah, little and often is a good thing, I think. And that rounding up thing, I definitely do. Sort of decide that extra, something over between £100 difference. So it might be 400 to 500. If it's 486, I'll just say I've got 400 and save the 86, for example. I think that's, similar principle really, and that works well.
Yeah.
Just to end up having a little bit more than you would have thought.
One other thing we actually do, which is I do that with our bills, where say our bill is like for water bills, like 50, like £5 and 17 pence or something. Because they're always like a ludicrous. It's not it's a very specific number rather than any kind of rounding. What I'll do is I'll round those numbers up on all the bills, so it actually looks like. So we have to because we have an account where all our bills come out of. So then it'll be like instead of I don't know, instead of like £987, it'll be £1,000, so let's call it. And then I'm putting an extra £17 a month into that account. And after a year, you've suddenly, out of nowhere, you've developed like 150 quid buffer or whatever. And you've got a bit of extra cash there for an unexpected bill or that kind of thing. So that can work really well as well. And we actively do that. And actually, it provides just a little bit of extra cushioning in your kind of current account, so that in case, something does come in higher than expected, you're not kind of shocked by it, and there is just that little bit of wiggle room kind of thing. So I think it's actually quite good. It's a good one. I approve. That's Mouthy Money approved. Yeah.
There we go. It's got the stamp. It's got the stamp, everybody. The last one is loud budgeting. I think that's really quite an interesting idea as well. Basically, it's the idea of being really vocal with your friends and family about what you're doing with your money. So this, I think, does hark back to what you were saying, that there's maybe nothing new under the sun in that money taboos has always been a thing. We don't talk about money at a dinner table or politics and those kind of things. But actually, if you have an aim in mind, then there's a reason why you can't come out to the dinner, or why you're, are you going to have drinks, or why you're going to miss this particular event. Telling people why, I think I get that. I kind of understand that. I think I'm lucky in that I have a group of friends who, if I just say no, will just assume the best and not the worst. So there'll be a good reason behind that, rather than you need to tell them why you're doing it. But I do, and I'm not saying people who do tell their friends don't have good friends. I suppose it's more, maybe there's a bit more of a relaxed attitude as to, look, we're all facing these challenges at the moment. Here's the reason why I'm doing it. And that level of honesty can be a good thing, I suppose. So I like the idea of loud budgeting, just because people are talking about money, and we're loud budgeting on here to an extent, I suppose. It's like, here's what's going on in our lives, and here's why, and here's what we're learning from it. And the more there's a conversation around it, the more people are going to learn from each other. So yeah, I think it's another good trend as well. I think it's something I would encourage to a point. I mean, you obviously don't want to be giving away too much information, and make sure it's to people you trust and that kind of thing. But yeah, I can see the value in being loud about your budgeting, definitely.
I think, yeah, I mean, I couldn't think about part. So I have done this I haven't done it to the extent of like, mates going out for dinner and it's like, I'm not coming, I don't have any money kind of thing. Maybe when I was at university and I was like eking out an absolutely like basic kind of existence on a, student budget. Probably not as a younger professional, although the only times I have definitely done it is when I've had mates, and if any of them are listening, I'm truly sorry, have done really expensive stag do's, and I'm kind of vocally being like, I'm not paying £1,000 to go to Ibiza. I'm just not doing it.
That's an awkward one.
I'm not doing it.
That's an awkward one.
Like, I'm not doing it. I'm sorry. I can't justify this. It's just not going to work for me.
So what did you tell them?
I think I was just like, I can't afford it. I just
fair enough.
Yeah, right. And then I did have a mate who did a skiing stag do in Andorra, which is like a cheap place to go skiing. and I went skiing, but I refused to ski.
There you go.
I just kind of hung out. I just did nothing on my own for like 2 days while everybody was skiing. It was very weird and fun.
So you just sat up a mountain, did you? Was that,
on my second day in Andorra, I went to the capital, the name of which I can't even remember because it's. And I went to like a spa. I just hung out at the spa by myself all day. In like,
so hang on, the spa was more expensive, was cheaper than the skiing.
Oh yeah, the spa was like €30 or something like that for the day.
Kind
of, not like a spa like getting massaged. Like it was just like a like thermal pools and
right, yeah.
Like okay. There'd be like a little like lazy like river type thing, and it was lovely. I came back and I was like, I'm very relaxed.
That's very stag doy, isn't it?
Ready for a really unpleasant night of heavy drinking.
You might have been onto something there, Ed. You're going to change. There'll be a new trend. The spa stag. The spa stag is a thing.
I do. Sorry, just around. I do have. I mean, I've had my past experience with friends who are very much more on it with the now budgeting thing, who are much more consciously tell you, I can't come out and because I'm, I don't have any money at the moment. In the past, my experience with them is they're the ones who tend to be like hitting financial goals before everybody else, saving for a house and that kind of thing. Because they'll be like, they're the ones who are really rigorous with like, no, I can't come out. And it's like, no, because they're putting all their money into for a house deposit and that kind of thing. So I think loud budgeting works. I think it is also liable to cause a bit more conflict in your kind of social group or community or whatever you want to call it. But sometimes there is an element, and this speaks back to the, some of the other stuff we've talked about in this is sometimes there has to be a bit of selfishness about what you need to get done in order to achieve those goals, and that can be difficult. But I think people, are fair on them if they do it. I think it's good, unfortunately. But yeah.
Why? No, I think you're right. It's good. It's not necessarily unfortunate. I think. It's just those tough conversations, and also if you're consistently prioritizing something else that someone else does, that's where it starts to get into a weird. Why did you go to that one and not the other one? But I do think there's merit in being honest and open as much as you can. Not to a fault, but just enough so that people understand the context of it. So yeah, all in all, loud budgeting, another stamp of approval, I think, from us. So yeah, get talking about it, guys.
Right, I think that draws us more or less to our conclusion, Chris. Thank you again for joining me and talking about all these different bits and pieces. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for listening in once again. You can obviously catch us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. You can watch us. And then, of course, everything else on the Mouthy Money website, newsletter, and social media channels, including TikTok. So thank you once again, everybody, and we will see you again soon.